My name is Cynthia Daughtery. I'm 27, and if someone had told me a year ago that a single text message would flip my entire understanding of love inside out, I would have laughed. I wasn't the dramatic type. I wasn't the girl who spiraled when a man pulled away. If anything, I was the opposite. I'd spent years in relationships where I tried too hard, waited too long, forgave too easily. And somewhere along the way, quiet promises turned into quiet disappointments. So when my boyfriend at the time sent the message, I recognized the script before I even opened it. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work, half listening to a coworker talk about weekend plans, when my phone buzzed. The preview alone told the whole story. I need a break, space to think. Please don't contact me for a while. A familiar ache opened in my chest, but it wasn't heartbreak, it was clarity. I'd seen this kind of message before. I'd watched friends crumble under it, watched people cling to space that was really just the soft launch of a breakup. The line between honesty and manipulation could be thin, but this was decisive. I stared at the text for a minute, maybe less. Then I typed, "Okay, take all the time you need. No long paragraphs, no begging, no anxious follow-ups. Just acceptance." It surprised even me, that calm. My coworker glanced over. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just got dumped." I said it casually, like I was talking about losing a pen. The truth was something inside me had gone quiet long before that text arrived. Something had dimmed after the third time he'd tested me with emotional distance, and the fifth time he'd weaponized silence during arguments. I hadn't called them tests back then, I'd called them rough patches. Funny how hindsight clears your vision. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt stale, heavy. His cologne clung to the sweater he'd left on the chair. His charger was still plugged in beside my bed. His toothbrush sat in the cup like it belonged there. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just started packing. It took an hour. 1 box for toiletries, 1 for clothes, 1 for the random things he'd slowly migrated into my space. His favorite mug, his old hoodie, a pair of running shoes he never actually used. I stacked everything neatly by the door, taped the boxes shut, and felt the air lighten. If he wanted his things, he could retrieve them. If not, I had no strong opinion either way. Later that night, I called my closest friend. "You free this weekend?" "Probably." "Why? What's up?" "I'm newly single," I said, "and I need to get out." There was a pause. "Wait, what? What happened?" He wanted a break. I gave him one. For real. For real. 2 days later, Friday night rolled around. I didn't want anything fancy, so I went to a local bar near my place. Somewhere dim, familiar, uncomplicated. The universe, with its chaotic sense of humor, seated me beside someone I knew from college, Evan Blake. Tall, warm-eyed, the kind of man who had always felt easy to talk to. We'd gotten along back then, but timing never worked out. He'd had a girlfriend, I'd had a boyfriend. Life had its way of keeping people in the correct lanes until further notice. But that night, the lanes shifted. At first, we just talked light things, nostalgic things. He teased me about my old study habits. I told him his haircut was finally decent. We laughed more than I expected. By the end of the night, we exchanged numbers not with intent, but with familiarity, like picking up a conversation we'd paused years ago. On Saturday, we grabbed dinner. Sunday, coffee. Monday, a movie. Tuesday, he came over and met my dog, which was hilariously chaotic because my dog immediately decided Evan was his new best friend. Everything was natural. No games, no tests, no tension simmering under the surface. He was direct with his words, present in conversation, and his laughter reached his eyes. By Wednesday morning, exactly 4 days after the break text, he and I took a selfie together. It wasn't planned. My dog had knocked over a pillow. Evan laughed. I laughed at him laughing, and he snapped the photo. I looked genuinely happy. He did too. Evan posted it on his Instagram. Caption simple, "Best week ever." I didn't think twice about it. My relationship was over, or in my ex's words, on a break. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't cheating. I was just living. But I'd forgotten something crucial. People who set emotional traps often panic when someone steps around them instead of falling in. My phone started buzzing around 8 that night. I ignored the first 2 calls, unknown number. Then I saw his name. 15 missed calls, then 30, then 50. By midnight, 89 missed calls. Not exaggerating, I counted. Then the text poured in, hundreds of them. I checked the first few. "This was a test of your love. I can't believe you moved on so fast. You were supposed to fight for me. Who even is he? I was testing you, Cynthia." I actually laughed. A hollow, disbelieving laugh. A test. A relationship test disguised as a breakup. Was I supposed to chase someone who told me not to contact him? Something cold settled in my chest. Not sadness, not anger. Recognition. This wasn't new behavior. It was just the first time I refused to participate. I screenshotted everything. The calls, the texts, even the timestamps. A quiet instinct told me I'd need evidence later. Then I turned my phone on silent, slid it into a drawer, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, my phone had effectively crashed under the weight of messages, voicemails, missed calls, texts from him, and from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I got dressed, went to work, and on my lunch break, I did one simple thing. Blocked his number. That afternoon, my Ring doorbell sent a notification. I checked the camera feed. He was standing at my doorstep, pacing, crying, checking his phone, running his hands through his hair like a man unraveling. My stomach tightened, but not out of pity. Out of certainty. The storm I sensed 4 days ago had finally arrived, and I was done playing weather control. When I pulled into my apartment parking lot that afternoon, I already knew he was there. The Ring notification had shown him pacing back and forth on the walkway, wiping under his eyes, like he was preparing a performance rather than expressing emotion. I parked, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the stairs with steady steps. The moment he spotted me, he inhaled sharply like relief and fury collided in his lungs. "We need to talk," he said, voice cracking just enough to sound rehearsed. I shook my head. "No, we don't." He stepped closer. "You can't just move on in 4 days." "You asked for a break," I said calmly. "You asked for space. I gave it to you." He blinked, stunned. "It was a test, Cynthia. A test to see if you loved me enough to fight for us." My jaw tightened, not because he said something shocking, but because he said something painfully predictable. "A test," I repeated. "Do you hear yourself?" You should have known, he snapped. Every girlfriend knows that when a guy says he needs space, he doesn't mean it literally. You were supposed to push back. Show me you cared. I let out a slow exhale. "No, that's not care. That's manipulation." His expression twisted. "So you just gave up, just like that?" "You ended the relationship," I said. "I simply respected your words." He stomped his foot, an actual stomp, like a child denied a toy. "I didn't think you'd actually move on." "Then maybe," I said softly, "you should have said what you meant." His face fell. Tears tried to form again. "Cynthia, please. I made a mistake. I love you. We can fix this." No. Just one word. Clean, final. Sharp enough to cut through months of confusion I used to swallow down. 2 years together and you're just done, he whispered. "You ended it," I reminded him. "I accepted it." He stared at me like I'd struck him. Then he tried a new tactic, guilt. "You didn't even try," he said. "Real love fights." Real love doesn't create problems just to test whether your partner reacts the way you want. That was the truth he couldn't handle, and the truth that pushed him over the edge. His voice rose, cracking like glass. "You're already seeing someone else. Are you serious? Are you trying to punish me?" I almost laughed. "You asked for space. I took you seriously. You don't get to rewrite the rules now." He opened his mouth again, but I'd already pulled out my phone. "I'm documenting this," I said quietly. "Please leave." His face froze. He took 2 shaky steps back. "You're a monster. And you're trespassing." He left in a huff of wounded pride and dramatic sighs, but I'd barely made it upstairs before my phone started buzzing again, this time with calls from an unknown number. I ignored them. I showered. I made dinner. I tried to reclaim the normalcy he'd cracked in half. But then my phone pinged with a voicemail from his mother. I sighed and pressed play. "Cynthia, sweetheart." She began in the tone older women use when they've decided a younger woman is at fault. "You need to forgive him. He made a mistake. You don't throw away a relationship because of one lapse in judgment." A lapse in judgment, a secret breakup as a test. I deleted the voicemail. Half an hour later, his friend messaged me, a long paragraph about how men sometimes need ego reassurance and how I was immature for not reading between the lines. I replied with one sentence. "I respect actual communication, not mind games." He blocked me instantly. Good, less noise. The next day, things escalated. My close friends texted me screenshots from Facebook. My ex had posted a long, vague rant about modern women giving up too easily and being abandoned after one mistake. He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. Our mutual friends flooded the comments with supportive emojis. Meanwhile, my real friends dropped into my DMs with messages like, "Girl, he's fishing for sympathy. Did he seriously turn a breakup test into a moral lecture? Do we need to gather?" I appreciated the chaos sisters rallying behind me, but I didn't want a war. I wanted quiet. But quiet wasn't in his vocabulary. That afternoon, he added himself to a group chat I shared with college friends. Added Tyler X. Can you guys talk sense into her? She's ruining everything. She moved on instantly. The messages filled the chat like smoke. Half the group defended me. The other half told me I should at least hear him out. I left the group and made a new one without them. The truth cost me 3 friendships that day. A fair trade. Later that night, Evan called. You okay? He asked. Just tired, I admitted. He's on a full-blown campaign. Against you. Against my peace, I thought. Against my refusal to play his game. He's texting people I haven't spoken to in years, I said. Posting online. Showing up places. It's a lot. You want me to back off? Evan asked gently. I closed my eyes. His tone wasn't insecure or offended. It was protective, respectful. A question, not an assumption. Absolutely not, I said. That's exactly what he wants. Good, Evan said. Because I'm not going anywhere. His words warmed something inside me that had been cold for a long time. By the weekend, my ex's behavior took on a new flavor: desperation. He posted old couple photos of us with captions like, when she actually loved me and before she gave up. He messaged my sister claiming I'd cheated. She called me immediately. What's wrong with him? She said. He told me you blindsided him. He told me he needed space, I replied. I respected it. My sister exhaled. Then that's all I need to know. You did nothing wrong. I felt myself soften. Support hits differently when your world is shaking. But the tipping point wasn't family, or friends, or social media. It happened 3 days later when my ex confronted Evan directly. Evan sent me a screenshot. Your girlfriend doesn't love you. She's just using you to hurt me. You're a rebound. You should walk away. Have some dignity. I read it twice. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from anger. This is unhinged, Evan texted beneath the screenshot. You okay? Yeah, I typed. I've dealt with worse. But thank you for telling me. Always, he wrote back. And somehow that steadiness meant more to me than anything else that week. My ex escalated again because men who rely on manipulation often don't stop when confronted. Fake accounts, anonymous warnings, mutual friends parroting his narrative. People I barely knew messaging me like they were experts in my relationship. He twisted everything, weaponized sympathy, played the scorned lover to perfection. I could feel the pressure tightening like a fist around my ribs. But even then, even through the exhaustion, one thought stayed clear in my mind. If this is how he behaves when I leave, imagine the future I avoided by refusing to stay. The storm wasn't ending, not yet. But I finally understood why I wasn't afraid. Because peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. Peace comes from choosing yourself. The week after he showed up at my apartment was when everything truly shifted from annoying to alarming. Blocking his number hadn't slowed him down. Muting him on social media hadn't created distance. People who refuse to hear the word no don't just stop trying. They simply find new ways to force themselves into your life, and that's exactly what he started doing. The first incident happened at my gym. I had been going there for years, and it had always been one of the few places where my mind felt quiet. But the morning I walked through the parking lot and saw him leaning against a lamppost pretending to stretch, that quiet shattered. He perked up the second our eyes met, calling out my name with a desperate enthusiasm that made the hairs on my neck rise. I didn't break stride or offer him a response, but he hurried to keep up with me anyway. Inside, he trailed after me toward the treadmills, trying to talk, insisting on 5 minutes, insisting that I owed him some sort of intimate debrief, simply because he wanted it. I walked straight to the front desk and told the staff he had been harassing me. They didn't hesitate. Security approached him, spoke to him quietly, and escorted him out, but not before he looked back at me with a combination of betrayal and disbelief as if he were the injured party. That look bothered me more than his presence. Anger I could have handled. Rage would have made sense. But shock meant he still believed he had some inherent right to my time, my attention, my emotional energy. 2 days later, the same thing happened, at the coffee shop near my apartment. I walked in, saw him sitting in a corner pretending to type, and immediately walked back out. When he realized I was leaving, he followed me outside, quickly calling my name and begging me to please just listen. I ignored him, got into my car, and locked the doors. He slapped his hand against the window, not violently but forcefully enough to make the message clear he wasn't leaving. I reversed the car and drove off while his face collapsed into something between frustration and panic. When I returned home that afternoon, my building manager pulled me aside. She informed me that my ex had attempted to enter the building multiple times over the past few days. Residents had complained. Management had warned him more than once. She told me they had him on security footage and that they were preparing documentation in case the situation escalated further. I thanked her, but inside I felt a knotted pressure building. I wasn't afraid of him hurting me physically, but I was afraid of the relentlessness of the feeling that my world was shrinking because someone else refused to let me move on. Around the same time, the digital harassment escalated. Fake Instagram accounts with no posts, no followers, and generic usernames began messaging me. The messages alternated between insults and warnings about my new boyfriend claiming he had cheated on previous partners, or that I was embarrassing myself by being with someone so quickly. The writing style was unmistakably his overly dramatic punctuation, unnecessary capital letters, and emotional manipulation disguised as concern. Evan received his own batch of fake messages accusing me of cheating, accusing him of being a rebound, accusing both of us of ruining something perfect. He sent me screenshots with dry humor, telling me not to worry, but I could tell he was starting to understand the depth of what I was dealing with. Then his extended family got involved. His cousin, a woman I had met twice, messaged me paragraphs about how he was not doing well and how he was falling apart. She asked if I could call him for 5 minutes because my voice would stabilize him. The implication was clear: if something happened to him, I would be responsible. People like to pretend that emotional blackmail is subtle, but it rarely is. I replied that if he was truly struggling, he needed professional help, not an ex-girlfriend he had manipulated. She called me heartless and blocked me. The worst part came when he showed up at Evan's workplace. Evan worked in a corporate office, nowhere public-facing, nowhere that a normal person could justify casually stopping by. But my ex went there anyway and attempted to talk his way past the receptionist, claiming he needed to speak to Evan man to man. When Evan told me about it, his voice was steady, but there was a tension underlying his calm that I hadn't heard before. Security escorted my ex out of the building, and he left complaining loudly about being treated like a criminal for trying to fix the situation like an adult. He later posted online about the incident, painting himself as a victim of a society that punishes men for fighting for love. His friends validated the delusion with comments about toxic women and modern immaturity. But the moment that genuinely unsettled me was a phone call from his father. The number was unfamiliar, and I answered without realizing who it was. His father's tone was sharp, impatient, and authoritative. He told me I needed to stop this, although he never clarified what this was. He accused me of abandoning his son, insisted that my ex was depressed, and asked whether I could live with myself if something happened to him. The accusation was disgusting in its implication. It was an attempt to transfer responsibility for an adult man's emotional state onto a woman he had manipulated and discarded. I responded as calmly as I could, saying that if his son was in crisis, he needed a therapist, not an ex-partner who had set clear boundaries. He hung up on me without another word. When I told Evan about the call, he didn't try to sweep it away or tell me I was overreacting. He didn't become defensive or insecure. He simply listened, then said we needed to document it along with everything else. At this point, our folder of evidence had grown enormous: screenshots, timestamps, messages, call logs, building reports, gym security notes. It felt surreal to compile what essentially amounted to a case file against someone I had once planned a future with. The next morning, the building manager delivered a notice to my door. An unauthorized individual had been repeatedly attempting access to the property. A trespassing warning had been formally issued. A photograph from the security footage was attached to my ex wearing a hoodie and cap, loitering near the back entrance with the expression of someone waiting for a door to magically open. Seeing the picture made something inside me settle, not fear, but clarity. The situation was no longer emotional. It was factual. It was documented. It was legally recognized. Interestingly, around this time, mutual friends who had sided with him at the beginning began switching positions. They reached out separately, apologizing for believing his claims that I had cheated or left him without warning. They told me that he had conveniently omitted the part where he had asked for a break. Some were embarrassed. Some were angry at him. Some admitted they had never liked how he handled conflict. I appreciated the apologies, but I didn't need them. I wasn't looking to reclaim anyone's approval. I was simply relieved that the truth had finally started to surface. Because that was when I realized something crucial. I wasn't afraid of losing people who preferred his narrative over reality. I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood anymore. His desperation wasn't proof of love. It was proof of entitlement. and his unraveling wasn't my responsibility, it was simply the natural consequence of a system of manipulation collapsing in on itself. The cracks in his mirror were beginning to spread, and with each one I felt a part of myself return that I didn't even know I'd lost. By the time the trespassing warning was issued, a strange calm began settling over me, like the eye of a hurricane had drifted directly above my life. Things weren't better, not even close, but the chaos had shifted into a pattern I could finally predict. And when something becomes predictable, it becomes manageable. What still surprised me, though, was how desperately he tried to keep the narrative tilted in his favor, even as it fell apart piece by piece. The first major crack happened online. He kept posting vague, melodramatic updates about heartbreak and betrayal, implying that I had left him without warning and replaced him instantly. He chose photos strategically. Old couple shots from vacations carefully cropped, selfies, pictures with captions like, "Before it all fell apart," or "When she still cared." He wanted an audience, and for a time he had one. His friends commented with sympathy. Strangers offered generic encouragement. Some mutual acquaintances posted supportive emojis without asking for context. And for a few days I let him have his pity stage. I figured he'd burn through it eventually. But then he posted a caption claiming he had no idea what went wrong and that he woke up one day abandoned. That was when the messages started coming in, not from the people who already knew the truth, but from the ones who had believed him and were now confused. 3 mutual friends reached out separately. One said, "He told us you cheated." Another said, "He claimed you blocked him out of nowhere." The third said, "He left out the part where he asked for a break." I didn't lash out or try to shame anyone for believing him. They had only heard one side, so I sent each of them the screenshots, the break text, the follow-up messages, the timestamps, the social media posts, the harassment logs. Each friend responded the same way, a pause followed by some variation of "Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry. He completely lied to us, or I had no idea he was like this." Their apologies weren't what mattered. What mattered was watching his carefully constructed version of events begin to fracture as more and more people saw behind the curtain. And once the curtain moved even an inch, the truth poured through like sunlight. Those friends quietly distanced themselves from him. Some unfollowed him. Some confronted him. A couple even told him to stop using them as pawns in his personal meltdown. And though he didn't stop posting, the engagement dropped, and the comments shifted from sympathy to awkward silence. Meanwhile, my own life, though still impacted by his chaos, was beginning to stabilize. Evan and I grew closer, not with grand declarations or dramatic moments, but in small, steady ways that felt grounding. He started showing up with my favorite tea when I'd had a stressful day. He walked with me to my car at night without making it feel like pity. He listened without offering unsolicited advice. One evening he said, "I know this is still heavy, but you're handling it with so much strength. I hadn't felt strong, but hearing it made me want to be." Meeting Evan's parents was another unexpected turning point. His mother greeted me with warm curiosity, and his father with a firm handshake that carried no judgment. Over dinner, his dad asked about my ex, not in a prying way, but in a practical one. "Our daughter mentioned you've been dealing with some complications." "Everything under control," he asked, not as a challenge, but as concern for his son's safety and mine. I explained everything briefly: the break, the test, the harassment, the stalking attempts, the trespassing warning. Evan's dad leaned back, shook his head, and said, "Life is too short for games like that. You were smart to walk away. It wasn't approval I had sought, but it felt like validation from a grounded, level-headed adult who saw the situation clearly." Evan's mother chimed in softly. "I'm glad you two met. You seem good for each other." Their acceptance added a sense of normalcy I hadn't realized I needed. But while my world was healing, my ex was doubling down. And his next strategy was to attack my professional life. Somehow he figured out where I worked, not difficult considering LinkedIn exists, and began calling my office pretending to be a family member with an emergency. The first-time reception transferred the call to me without hesitation. His voice came through frantic and pleading, demanding that I talk to him. I ended the call abruptly and reported it to HR. 2 days later, he called again, claiming to be my sister. Thankfully, reception had been warned and verified with me before transferring anything. When I confirmed the deception, they blocked his number and flagged the incident. HR documented everything. The building's legal department gave me resources. I appreciated their professionalism, but a part of me felt nauseous knowing he was willing to cross into my career, my last untouched space. He also continued trying to influence my family. My sister received a message claiming I had cheated. She immediately called me annoyed rather than concerned. "He's spiraling," she said. "He told me you betrayed him emotionally," whatever that means. I explained the situation again, and she responded, "I figured. Just checking. I'm on your side." Her consistency was reassuring. But the final crack in his narrative, the one he couldn't plaster over, came when a mutual friend who hadn't spoken to either of us much reached out asking for the truth. When I sent her the logs, she said, "He's been telling everyone you ghosted him during a mental health crisis." That was when I realized he wasn't just editing the story, he was rewriting the entire script to cast himself as a tragic hero and me as the villain. When she asked, "Can I share this with others?" "People deserve to know," I said yes. I didn't want revenge. I wanted honesty. And she shared it, quietly, privately, but thoroughly enough that the tide shifted. Friends who had once defended him stepped back. Others apologized. Some simply stopped commenting on his posts. Without an audience, his dramatic laments suddenly seemed theatrical rather than sympathetic. He continued posting sad quotes and vague comments about heartbreak, but fewer people engaged. Around this time, a handwritten letter arrived at my apartment. 5 pages, loopy handwriting, carefully chosen words. He apologized for everything, for the test, for the lies, for pushing me away out of fear. He said he was in therapy now that he understood the harm he caused, that he hoped one day I could forgive him. The letter ended with, "I know you've moved on, and I respect that, but I needed to let you know how sorry I am." I read it once, not with longing, not with anger, just with a distant kind of clarity. Then I placed it in the documentation folder with everything else. Evan asked later, "Are you going to respond?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "She doesn't deserve your energy," he replied and kissed my forehead. Even then, even with the apology letter, even with the silence that followed, I knew the story wasn't completely finished. Not yet. There was one last moment waiting, the moment all this was leading toward. And I didn't know whether it would feel like closure or simply the end of a very long chapter. 2 months passed after the handwritten apology letter arrived, and during that time, something inside me settled into a quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not silence quiet. Silence has an edge to it, like waiting for another shoe to drop. Quiet is different. Quiet is what happens when your nervous system finally believes you're safe again. The harassment tapered off after the police issued the trespassing warning, and although he still posted occasional sad quotes or nostalgic throwback pictures, they no longer carried weight. They were just static on a channel I'd stopped watching. My world shifted in ways that felt small at first, but ultimately profound. I moved in with Evan earlier than either of us would have predicted months before, but it didn't feel reckless. It felt natural. We communicated, we planned, we adjusted to each other's habits. There were no mind games, no tests disguised as boundaries, no contradictions to decipher. Evan said what he meant, and he meant what he said. That alone felt like luxury. We cooked together most nights. Sometimes we read in the same room without speaking. Sometimes we talked about the future in that tentative, curious way 2 people do when they're not making promises but acknowledging possibilities. Every once in a while, he'd ask if I was still okay, if anything from the past was lingering heavy. The answer slowly shifted from, "I'm getting there," to, "I think I finally am." Then the day of the accidental meeting arrived. I had gone to the coffee shop near my office, a place that had once felt tainted but had since regained a sense of normalcy. I walked inside, scanning the room out of habit more than fear, and there he was, my ex, sitting at a corner table, a half-empty cappuccino in front of him, staring at his phone. He looked up at the exact moment I saw him, and our eyes met with a kind of muted recognition. Not shock, not anger, just inevitability. For half a second I considered leaving, but something inside me said no. Not out of defiance, but out of certainty. I had spent so long being interrupted by him, disrupted by him, pulled into emotional labyrinths he built for me to get lost in. Walking out now would feel like performing fear I no longer felt. So I stayed. I approached the counter, calmly ordered my drink, and waited. He stood up and walked toward me, slower and quieter than I'd ever seen him move. "Cynthia," he said, almost whispering. "Hi," I replied, neutral, civil. Up close, he looked different. tired, thinner, the kind of worn-down expression people get when they've been living inside their own consequences for too long. He swallowed hard. "You look good," he said. I nodded politely. "Thanks, you too." A long silence followed. Not tense, just empty. He glanced at the floor, then back up. "I'm sorry for everything." "I know," I said. "I got your letter." "You didn't respond." "I didn't feel the need to." Another silence. He shifted his weight. "Do you forgive me?" He said it softly, but it wasn't a fragile question. It was a question expecting reassurance, expecting emotional labor I no longer offered. I held his gaze. "I don't think about you enough to hold a grudge," I said. "You made a choice when you asked for that break. I made a choice when I respected your words. We're both living with the results." He looked startled, like he had expected either warmth or hostility, but wasn't prepared for neutrality. Neutrality is powerful. It's the one reaction manipulators can't work with because there's nothing to push against. "So you're over it?" he asked. "I was over it the day you made our relationship into a test." He winced, not dramatically, but enough that I could see the truth land. He nodded slowly. "I didn't realize how badly I handled things until it was too late." "Maybe," I said, "but that realization is yours to deal with, not mine." He looked like he wanted to say more, but there was nothing else for him to take from the moment except closure, and closure only has value when it's earned, not demanded. So he nodded one last time. "I hope you're happy." "I am," I said simply. "I hope you heal." He walked out of the coffee shop with a slower gait than he'd entered. I watched him leave without feeling triumphant or sentimental. It felt like running into someone I once worked with at a job I'd long since left. Familiar, but irrelevant to my present life. There was no anger, no sting, no ache, just the calm acknowledgement of a past chapter finally settling into place. When I stepped outside with my coffee, Evan was sitting in the car, waiting for me, scrolling through his phone. He looked up immediately when he saw my expression. "That him?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "You okay?" "I'm good," I said, and realized I truly meant it. "It's done. Really done." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Good. Let's go home." The word home didn't echo with uncertainty anymore. It felt solid, warm, lived in. Our apartment wasn't perfect. Laundry, piled up dishes sometimes sat too long. We occasionally disagreed about whose turn it was to take the dog out, but it was ours. And it was peaceful. Weeks after that encounter, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened, not in a nostalgic way, but in a way that allowed me to draw clean lines under the lessons learned. I realized something important breaks are often breakups in disguise. Tests aren't ways to measure love. They're ways to control someone without admitting what you're doing. Respecting someone's stated boundaries isn't cruelty, it's honesty. And most importantly, moving on isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. He wanted me to fight for him by ignoring his words, by chasing him despite being told not to. He wanted control wrapped in vulnerability, a test wrapped in a plea. He wanted me to prove that I valued him more than myself. But I didn't fail his test. I passed my own. And the right man didn't ask me to pass anything. He didn't demand demonstrations of love. He didn't lace affection with conditions. He didn't make me prove myself. He simply chose me consistently with clarity and honesty, the way healthy people do. He wasn't a test.